Hey, I'm Neal Brennan, and you're watching Consequence. Consequence.
Hi, I am Paolo with Consequence, and I'm here with Neal Brennan today. Neal, how are you doing?
Paulo, doing pretty good.
Pretty good. Well, Neal, I just want to say first and foremost, congratulations on your show Unacceptable. It's at the Cherry Lane Theater right now in New York City. It's a wonderful, wonderful comedy show. It's been going for about a month and a half. I got a chance to see it last night, and it was really marvelous. It was so rich and so many wonderful jokes and had some great elements to it. So just to kind of get it started, can you go through a little bit of the origin of that show for me and just talk about the process of, coming up with like that sort of set design, how conceptual you wanted it to be, and yeah, just some of your thoughts on beginning that process.
Um, yes. I had, I write jokes in a fairly piecemeal way. Like I just write jokes, right? And then I was looking at all of them, like, and I kind of thought, like, what am I getting at? And what I was getting at was self-defense, basically. And so and I thought, like, I'm saying something here and I'm getting at a bigger point, which is like I'm saying, like, I don't, I'm sort of rude to myself, and I find myself unacceptable. Society finds me unacceptable. Um, but maybe I am acceptable, right? Maybe I'm not unacceptable. So, and then from there, I texted my friend Derek Delgaudio, who ended up being the director of the piece, and asked him about something looking like one thing and then becoming another thing, and then he texted me an idea. He showed me a thing, and then that became kind of an element of the show.
That's great. I think
Yeah.
what's so wonderful about Unacceptable is that it really kind of picks up, I think, a little bit where Three Mics left off. And I think that that was a really big way that a lot of people began to take a big interest in your work. And I just wanted to ask a little bit like how did Three Mics kind of change a little bit of the trajectory of your career? What was a little bit of the fallout like?
It was, I mean, Fallout generally has like negative connotations. I know what you mean. Like, what were the, I think it's more like results.
Yeah.
It was like, people, I did an hour on Comedy Central called Women in Black Dudes Hold for Applause. And, and it was like well rated, but nobody seemed to really care. I was kind of trying to get away from the I'm Dave's plus one, or I'm Dave's mooch or lackey, or whatever disrespectful term you want to use. And so it was the Comedy Central special. I actually did an hour and a half on Comedy Central. Um, didn't do enough to get me away from that, and also my stand-up career was fairly nascent. So style, I didn't really have any style other than like, you just go up there and do stand-up, right? So I had done that. No one really cared. So I was like, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not just going to toil away as a comedian and no one cares, right? So I was like, I'll do one more special, and if that works, then I'll keep doing it. And it was Three Mics, and the fallout, as you call it. Why did you use that word? The fallout, as you call it, was that people were like, oh, you're actually your own artist. You're your own person, your own independent thing and person, and you're a legitimately talented person. Because people can't tell unless, I mean, if you're partners with somebody, especially if there is sort of a a comet like Dave, it's hard for people just give him 95%, and you go, yeah, you want 5? And so it's, it was, oh, you're also talented, nowhere near as talented as Dave, but you're talented.
I see.
So that was sort of that legitimized me, so to speak. And then it also opened up, it put me in the category with like Birbiglia, and it's not very many people. Birbiglia, I guess Hannah Gadsby, who did hers like maybe 6 months after, I mean, whatever, like shortly after, or maybe the next year she did Nanette. So it opened up the traumedy hole, as I call it.
Yeah. I did want to ask you a little bit about that. You do kind of mention, the only person last night in the show, you talked about how some of the only people who were productive over the pandemic and quarantine was Bo Burnham. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more about what you thought about Inside, and about, if that a little bit picks up where you left off, and some of the kind of shared ideas that are kind of connected between both your work.
Bo is a thief. Bo is a thief, and I'm here to tell. I don't even think it's shared ideas. I think it's, what's interesting is his last special. The end of it was a bit of like, it was like a Kanye auto-tune, breakdown at the end, and Bo keeps his mental illness or emotional stuff, he plays it pretty close to the vest. This one he actually said panic disorder. So yeah, I think I the thing I like about Bo is that he, because he's a director also, he didn't start as a comedian, so he's not tied to convention. Like, because he started as a YouTube song person, he's not tied to you come out, he's not like, I grew up in comedy clubs. Like, I personally, I mean, like, my brother was a comedian in high school. I've known David Tell since I was 13. I've known Ray Romano since I was 13, 14. Like, I've known like capital C comedians since I was a kid. So Bo's not tied to that, and I'm less tied to it also, but he's like, so Bo sees stand-up shows as they can be a lot of stuff, and I feel the same way.
Wonderful.
But I don't have any. Bo has probably no voice in his head being like, it's illegitimate, whereas I do.
I don't know. You'd be surprised.
Well, but, yeah. Oh no,
we
yeah,
all
you're
have
right.
that voice in our head. Everything.
Yeah, everybody has. Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, too, I did. I was kind of curious because these last two sort of specials, and really the trajectory of your career as a writer has made me sort of curious about what you feel is still left to investigate, right? As a writer, are there topics, because you have written a lot about mental health and of course comedy and the state of the world, but I'm curious if there's anything that's even more specific that you're like, I'd love to write a TV show about, or a film about, or a comedy special about, something that's still worthy of investigation to you. That's a tough question.
No, it's more like, part of it is, what do I like writing about, and what do people like reading or watching me talk about?
Yeah.
So, for instance, like Ira Glass came to see Unacceptable, and he was like, why don't you just do an entire show about one relationship with a woman, right? That's a good idea. Like, because that's kind of the, that's kind of a thing that there's a couple things I'm obsessed with, and the first special is called Women and Black Dudes, because it's like the things that I keep thinking about, and not black dudes, I just mean like race. And Dave's wife probably 20 years ago said, all you and Neal talk about is women and work being race.
Yeah.
And so So yeah, I think it's like you just find it's similar to what I say about your psyche in the show, is that you think you'll outgrow this stuff, and it just recurs over and over and over and over. And I don't think any of it's solvable, you know? So my bet is I'll just keep being obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And so it's finding variations on it. You know, it's finding ways to do it that are novel, and that again, it's like, what do people like watching me? You know, I remember Chris Rock called me, and I mean, this is probably 5-6 years ago, but he's like, hey man, I listen to a lot of satellite radio, and he's like, you have a lot of really good jokes about women. And I was like, yeah, I just have a thing, like I don't know. So there's nothing there's no like undiscovered territory. There's just certain shit that's interesting to people, because I could write a lot about, like, I've been talking a lot about ayahuasca on podcasts, and it's not that interesting. It's a bit like spiritual stuff is a bit like talking about your dreams, where you're like, and then a goblin came and the goblin talked like Keith Richards, and just like, it doesn't mean anything. Whereas you know, race and relationships is like, those are pretty big topics that aren't going anywhere.
Just like the word that you mentioned, novel, I think is like so important, that like you don't want to just rehash things to rehash them, that you sort of are still constantly investigation of a lot of the same topics, but you're finding so many new ways to talk about them and new ways to explore them. And like, that's,
well, yeah, I mean, it's also like a market thing, where people like the thing I say is Dave and Chris and Bill Burr and those guys can kill in a way that I can't quite kill. So it's like not a huge difference, but there's a difference. They can get the kind of laugh where it sounds like there's maybe a fire in the theater. And like I can't quite, like, I mean, in Bring the Pain, the camera's shaking because Chris is killing so hard.
Yeah.
And I can't quite get there, but I can give people a full meal if I include some emo stuff. So, which some people don't like. Some people are just like, yo, man, just keep it glib, keep it light. But to me, it's like, I don't know. I want to give people a full, some bang for their buck.
Definitely. So another thing that I was a little bit curious about, to kind of extend into like a little bit of more of a broad conversation, is, you know, over the pandemic, I think a lot of us had certain pieces of content that we like flocked to, music, TV, films. What were yours? Were there any like movies that you just were like, I have to watch this 3 times this week, or albums that you just couldn't get enough of?
I pulled some strings, and I got a cut of The Last Dance probably 3 weeks before it came out.
Wow.
So that
you had
was
a good
like,
joke about that too in the
yeah. That was obviously a big one.
Yeah, you're from Chicago, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Wilmette. I wasn't there. I lived in Chicago in the 80s, moved in 86, but first of all, this is a double whammy of, Neal, how old are you? Well, I once saw 2 little white girls mistake Michael Jordan for Orlando Woolridge.
Wow.
There was a point where there were people who didn't know who Michael Jordan was on site, kids. And he was actually like, I could see him get like hurt. It was pretty awesome. But what did I watch? I couldn't really tell you. I listened to like, I would have to look at like my playlist, but I don't know, man.
How do you normally like listen to music? Do you do like a big long playlist? and just
I
listening to it,
basically
or
have iTunes. I'm one of the few people, I'm not iTunes. I have YouTube Music.
wow,
And the reason I know, thank you very much. And
well done.
because you can get Google Drive as part of it. So
Oh, so
it's a
space.
thing, and it's actually a good music service. So I just a lot of like, I listen to more EDM than people would guess. And honestly, to get back to the most boring subject on earth, I did a bunch of ayahuasca during quarantine. And you don't want to hear those songs. No, those are no, it's like, so it's all kind of like spiritual, uplifting, and tribal music.
Wow. So
Mhm.
you would you do it like in your home? Was this
No,
like
I would do it every few weekends.
you would go on like a retreat?
Yeah, it wasn't even really a retreat. It was like a place in LA.
Cool. Wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I would love to hear a little bit more about those experiences. I know you say it's boring, and I'm sure you've talked about
Well,
it.
it's just, it's spiritual. So it is a bit like, not like it's private, because I've talked about it on the Breakfast Club, but I went from being an atheist to a believer, and not a believer like, and God saved my heart and passed the plate. I just like was like, oh, I don't believe that there's any I'm just some weird anomaly of human beings. And then, but now I believe that there's a central energy force that I am a splinter of. And yeah, so, and it's better. And I say that as like, not, I say that as just purely results based, like, oh no, this feels better. So for the record, if you're out there, but then you gotta, you gotta find it. And you have to have these same exact experience as me. And but yeah, I don't really, what else did I watch that I didn't really do. I already like have such a cloistered life because of, I'm not married, don't have kids, and I do stand up at night, and then sometimes I direct commercials. And so I'll be home for days at a time anyway. And what with all the services that you can get to the house, it wasn't that different than my normal life.
Yeah.
And like I said in the show last night, like it was kind of nice to get the reversal of like, no, you enjoy some discomfort there, extroverts. It's called anxiety. Yeah. How do you don't like it, do you? Yeah, that's what a lot of us live with on a constant basis.
Oh yeah. So kind of going back actually to the music thing, what kind of music did you grow up on?
I grew up on classic rock, and then toward the end of high school, I started listening to a lot of hip hop after Public Enemy sort of hit. I wasn't part of the Run DMC Beastie Boys wave. It just
The
didn't.
80s, yeah.
Yeah, like, and then Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back came out in 88 or 89. I think 88. And so they're all on Def Jam, but it just that was the one where I was like, I heard it and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like literally, like, what the fuck is this? And then it was a weird thing where it spoke. I grew up like my dad's a lawyer. I didn't grow up like in any sort of hard scrabble environment. Like I went to Catholic school. My dad's a lawyer. Grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Heard that and was like, the fuck. And then that was 88. And then Do the Right Thing came out, and I believe in 89. And Spike Lee did a lot of press about it, and obviously Public Enemy had Fight the Power, and it's like a central part of the movie. And Spike's press was all about going to NYU film school, and I was like, what's that now? Film school, you say? So then I was like, I think I would like to go to film school. And and it was great because it was in New York, and I was already visiting here from Philly, visiting my brother at comedy at stand-up, right? And so I got into NYU for film school, like miracle, because I got like 1070 on my SATs, and I think they let me in because I made a funny short, and then I only lasted a year, but it's like directly because of Spike Lee.
Wow.
Like, oh, this is a way to go, and then yeah, and then and then also like, yeah, it was, so I would listen to classic rock, and then that became hip hop, and then it became hip hop and like Jane's Addiction. I didn't even really, it wasn't like, who was on Lollapalooza? The first Lollapalooza.
Oh, I think Jane's Addiction, yeah, because it's
Yeah, well, yeah, it was Perry Farrell's idea, but like that was sort of I was sort of like, there wasn't much of an alternative. There was no, it was like what would you call the alternative scene, but I didn't like 120 Minutes was like an MTV show. A Depeche Mode and The Cure, and like the sort of the stalwart. They didn't really, I don't know, like it was just like I like that and I like that, and it was never like a movement per se, but it was the baby boomers had such a hold that they had so much radio, and there's also a cultural thing where there's like in Philly, there's like a few classic rock stations, or there were then, because there's just kind of no risk to it for the consumer. They just go like, I like this. And then occasionally they'd be like, and also there's this other band, Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and like we'll play them a little. We'll play Even Flow, which has a classic rock feel.
Yeah.
So I wasn't like not like I wasn't exposed, but the finding this stuff was harder, like was really hard. It was like took every, you'd have to go to the store and magazines, and then the record store, and so, and then liner notes, and they like this part, like it was a bit of a scavenger hunt. Whereas now you just hit like this button and you get a torrent of the algorithms. Like I'll take it from here. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, it's definitely changed in the last 10 years, just the way that people are consuming music. I was talking about Glee the other day, about how like they made so much money on just selling the songs that would be in the shows every week. And it was like they couldn't have done that in 1992. Like, just wouldn't have worked. But
Well, yeah, they maybe could have, but what's funny is like it just reminds me of early hip hop, where a lot of those albums you could not make now, because the samples were too expensive.
Yeah.
I think with what you're saying is like Glee was like a jukebox musical show. So I don't even know if I agree with you. They might have been able to do that. It just was it would have been such an odd idea. So yeah, like, but it is funny. You say Glee, and I'm like, was that on 30 years ago? When was that on? Like, it's so long ago.
Yeah.
I feel bad for musicians. I mean, I'm friends with a few musicians. The amount of music that's just released on a constant basis is like, how do you make noise? Like, if you don't get picked up by, if you don't have a TikTok craze, and if you don't have, I think it's like, it's so much is left to chance, maybe more than ever, in terms of like popularity.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, one other question I want to ask before we wrap up is, what can we expect from Neal Brennan in 2022?
A lot of violence. What can you expect? I would assume that I will record this for a streamer, and then it'll stream. I'll be streaming, although I don't want people in New York to be like, I'll just wait till then. So if you can omit if the algorithm could omit this part of the interview for certain ISPs.
Sure.
Yeah, and then I'm doing a doc series for a streamer with Kevin Hart. So Kevin had an idea that he asked me to do, and it's a good idea, and I was like, yep, I'll do that, but it's going to be a lot of work. So that'll, I don't even know if that'll be 2022. That's what I'm going to be like. That's what, if you see me in person, that's what you can expect me being, like looking tired and obsessed about a thing. But hopefully the unacceptable will come out and speak to people just as it did you, Paolo, you and your lady.